Satyajit Rai, Berlin, July 2nd, 1966. Your central theme, as far as I can see it, in all your work, is the conflict between the old and the new. And I think that you have, in many ways, for the non-Indian observer, revealed that the problems that exist in adjusting to the technical society are the same all over the world. I think that you have fought in many ways against certain eliminations of spirit, against certain dying of feelings that are caused by the industrial society, that are caused by progress. And I'm most interested in this whole series of conversations in this book to find what keeps the individual moving in confrontation with the rather obvious pessimism of the progress of the world. I'm not sure if I'm expressing myself very clearly. I feel very strongly about it, and I think that among the people who have made this dialectic most clear in their work is you, and that's the topic I'd like to talk to you about.
Well, when I started out with my first film, of course, I didn't have this very ambitious idea in mind of doing anything beyond making films which pleased me and which I hoped eventually will please people. And I didn't have the intention of reforming or doing anything beyond making films for the primary purpose of expressing myself and enjoying the process of making it, and eventually, of course, hoping that people would enjoy, people would react to what I did. But I didn't have a theme in mind, and of this conflict between old and new. I didn't even know whether all my films would have a kind of a basic approach to life, to life's problems. But as it turns out, as I look back on what I've done, I feel you may be right, and that the dominant theme has been this conflict between old and new, because obviously in a country like India, this is the most exciting, the most dramatic, the most significant, the most usable aspect. My films more or less have repeated that theme, shall we say. How many have I made now? 12, 13, the trilogy. That, of course, in the very first film, because there was this aspect of old and new wasn't so pronounced, and it was not planned as a trilogy, as you probably know, and it was only the success of part one that caused the making of part two, and gradually the theme emerged, and in part three, of course, it's come to the fore, and it is the thing there. But old and new, this aspect, this conflict is present in so many different ways, and even if you're doing a 19th century story, as I've done several times with Tagore and various other things, that feeling was there, that basic theme was there already.
For example, I think that in Charulata you have expressed that which in the conflict of old and new seems to me the most important element, namely what happens to the individual when he is simultaneously confronted with the necessities of adjusting to a society which is changing, and at the same time feels that his own personal emotions and feelings are in conflict with this change. In Charulata you have the two opposed personalities very clearly defined, the poetic, romantic, non-realistic, and the other perhaps equally romantic, but at least with a social aim in mind, the editor of the newspaper. And torn between them, the woman who
the central character is the woman, of course.
And what happens to her in this conflict. And frankly, I feel that you personally are in that situation of being torn in that sense.
Well, you see, I have tackled precisely that aspect in one of my films. It's called The Big City, where, of course, you have this phenomenon of a fairly conservative family. The parents are middle-aged, And the son, of course, belongs to our times, and he has a job in a bank. And then the wife has to go out to work to add to the family income, and she meets with resistance from the in-laws. At the end of the film, of course, the wife, I mean, she does go out to work, she's a success, and she begins to earn more than the husband, and there's the inevitable psychological conflict between husband and wife. And at the end of the film, she gives up her job, you see. And I don't actually show that it's a good thing. I mean, it's not clearly shown that, stated, although it's implied, that it's important and it's necessary under certain circumstances for the wife to go out to work. I mean, it's right. But then, inevitably, certain forces complications arise, you see. And you can't accept one and completely leave out the others that go with it, you see. I mean, the fact of her need to work is there, and she does go out to work, and she's happy, and she's a success. But it leads to complications on the domestic side, and leads inevitably to unhappiness and misunderstandings. And the two exist side by side in a society such as ours. And director, what he can do, I think, is to present the whole thing from all its aspects and leave it to the spectator to draw his own conclusions. I mean, present a problem clearly and give food to the people for thought. And I think my attitude also comes through finally. I mean, it's all on the side of moving with the times, shall we say, because it's inevitable. Otherwise you isolate yourself from society, from everything, and then where are you? You're in an island, you form your own island, and you live in a world which has nothing to do with the world around you. I mean, it's a kind of escapism. And you have to accept the facts of progress, I think, but also you have to accept at the same time what goes with it, what it implies in terms of disrupting values and changes of outlooks and this and that, you see.
Do you have any sort of an overall view of the meaning of progress, of the meaning of change, in terms of humanity's development in general? For example, if you look at history, you'll find that for 50 million years, the human being was pretty much the same, with small change. And then suddenly, in a time which in history counts like a second, let's say the last 6,000 years, the human being began to influence his own biological situation and to change it, and thereby to create a surrounding to which biologically he's probably not basically adept.
I mean, I think it's an inevitable adjunct of progress that man will gradually lose touch with nature and become more sort of dehumanized. And this is a process which is becoming more and more rapid, and it's one can almost feel it, even over the last 10, 20 years, and one can actually feel the changes that's taking place. And what I most strongly regret is the fact that of man losing his opportunity for contemplation. I have been recently reading the Upanishads and the Vedas, in translations, because I don't know Sanskrit well enough to read them in the original. But you feel that all the fundamental facts of human life and human feeling and man's relationship with nature, it was all discovered and written about 2,000 years ago. All the fundamental things have already been stated by human beings who had the time to be contemplative, to think and to philosophize and to state their thoughts in terms of through verse and through writings. And actually what science is doing, I feel, by opening up frontiers of knowledge, and I think it's taking the scientists, they're imbibing a certain metaphysical attitude again by going more and more, deeper and deeper into the facts of life, into the facts of existence. And I think this is part of a cycle, and I think we are going more and more and more towards this mechanization, industrialization, and we'll reach up to the nth degree, and then we will probably revert. And and react and regret, shall we say.
One should
still-
when
yeah.
that film's been made many times, of course, because it's a central theme of human concern. whether
Yes.
The destruction and the recreation.
Rebirth, recreation, yes. You see, we have a certain span of life in which we operate as artists, you see, and you have to consider the facts of existence as it exists around you, and you build your films on themes which affect you immediately, and there, of course, you have to accept the facts of progress because they affect your lives and affect the themes of your stories. You see, your stories cannot ignore. You're not making a film as a philosopher all the time, futuristic prognostications and prophecies. But if you're dealing, as you are, obviously, with life and reality around you, then you have to accept the fact of progress because it's too real to be ignored. It's there all around you. Special signs and things affect you, and naturally they go to make they're integrated in your film, in whatever you say, whatever you do, however you think, your approach to life. I'm concerned with visible reality as which can be comprehended through one's senses. And I'm not working as a prophet. I'm working as a, shall we say, as a chronicler with an attitude. When I write my original stories, I'm always writing about people and society that I know. I've done it once with Kanchenjunga. I've done it again with Nayak, the new film. It's my original story. And whenever I think of a story, I think of something which I know at first hand. But I have done other things too. I've done classes of society I'm not familiar with. I have depended on writers, on existing novels and stories. Tagore with 19th century Bengal, Banerjee with the rural Bengal, the trilogy novels, you see. I felt sympathetic because they were very revealing in what they wrote, and I could see that an artist doesn't really always have to know at first hand, you see. One has to have, he can sympathize, he can have this feeling of empathy, you see, which is sufficient to give him this urge to make a film.